Namaste. Good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, those who are listening, watching from the field of English literature, language, grammar. Dear friends, in this month of January, every scholar and learner of the different universities, colleges are entertaining and enjoying with their home activities. That is the most knowledgeable part of life. Easily and comfortably work at home can be adopted by our scholars. Dear friends, in these days of winter, you can prepare yourself for learning by self. Doing self-study is the best technique of learning. It is said in all our holy religions of our holy land. If we talk about our Indian culture, climate, it has so many changes, varieties, adversities, but its aim to create oneness, unity and equality in all the holy religions, holy scriptures, all the languages, caste, color, creed that we see in the world. These are contributed by our Indian scholars. Time to time, our youngsters represented lead to the worldly affairs. So it is really remarkable, outstanding and amazing thing for our people of India, those who are living in India and abroad. All of you are listening Third Thoughts, that was written by E.V. Lucas. This story was told to me by a friend. It is my destiny to buy in the dearest markets and to sell if I succeed in selling at all in the cheapest. Usually, indeed, having tired of a picture or decorative article, I have positively to give it away, almost to make its acceptance by another a personal favor to me. But the other day was marked by an exception to this rule, so striking that I have been wondering if perhaps the luck has not changed and I am, after all, destined to be that most enviable thing, a successful dealer. In this modern time, with the modern technologies, revolution in information technology, our users, villagers have become the best user of this technology, and as per the notion of our most honorable President Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, 40% people of our villagers have become the user of these transactions. Every day in India we feel the day of initiation, beginning, starting to do something better, nicer, finer for our society and nation. Dear friends, if every day we entertain and every day we celebrate as the new day, then the new energy give us power to be nationalistic and patriotistic for others. We can put ourselves away from selfishness and we can be the true trader of life. It happened thus in drifting about the old curiosity shops of a cathedral city. I came upon a portfolio of watercolor drawing, among which was one that to my eye would have been a possible Turner, even if an earlier owner had not shared that opinion or hope and set the magic name with all its initials beneath it. How much is this? I asked scornfully. Well, said the dealer, if it were a genuine Turner, it would be worth anything, but let's say 10 shillings. You can have it for that, but I don't mind if you don't, because I am going to London next week and should take it with me to get an opinion. I pondered. Mind you, I don't guarantee it, he added. I gave him the 10 shillings. By what incredible means I found a purchaser for the drawing at £50 there. There is no need to tell, for the point of this narrative resides not in bargaining with collectors, but in bargaining with my own soul. The astonishing fact remains that I achieved a profit of £49.10 and was duly elated. I then began to think the dealer, so my thoughts ran in that little street by the cathedral west door. He ought to participate in this. He behaved very well to me and ought to behave well to me, well to him. It would be only fair to give him half. Thereupon I sat down and wrote a little note saying that the potential Turner drawing, which no doubt he recollected, had turned out to be authentic, and I had great pleasure in enclosing him half of the proceeds, as I considered that the only just and decent course. Having no stamps and the hour being late, I did not post this and went to bed. At about 3 a.m. I woke widely up and, according to custom, began to review my lives. From these I raised, by way of mitigation, my recent successful piece of chaffering and put the letter to the dealer under both examination and cross-examination. Why give him half? Why be? This is no word for quixotic. It was my eye that detected the probability of the drawing, not his. He had indeed failed, did not know his own business. Why put a premium on inaptitude? No, a present of, say, £10 at the most would more than adequately meet the case. Sleep still refusing to oblige me, I took a book of short stories and read one. Then I closed my eyes again and again began to think about the dealer. Why? It will only give him a wrong idea of his customers, none other of whom would be so fair, so supporting as I. He will expect similar letters every day and be disappointed, and then he will become embittered and go down the vale of tears, a miserable creature. He looked a nice old man to a pity, nay, a crime, to injure such a nature. No, £10 is absurd. 5 would be plenty, 10 would put him above himself. While I was dressing the next morning, I thought about the dealer again. Why should I? Why should I directly I had for the first time in my life brought off a financial cop, spoil it by giving a large part of the profit away? Was not that flying in the face of the goddess business, whoever she may be? Was it not asking her to disregard me? Only a day or so after we had at last got on terms. There is no fury like a woman scorned. It would probably be the end of me. City magnates are successful probably just because they don't do these foolish impulsive things. Impulse is the negation of magnetism. If I am to make any kind of figure in this new role of fine arts speculator, I must control my feelings. No, £5 is absurd. A douceur of £1 will meet the case. It will be nothing to me, or at any rate, nothing serious, but a gift of quill and manuscript accompanied by a brief note to the effect that I had sold the drawing at a profit, which enabled me to make him a present, because it was an old and perhaps old belief of mine that one should do this kind of thing. Good luck should be shared. I had the envelope in my pocket containing the note and the check when I reached the club for lunch, and that afternoon I played bridge so desirously that I was glad I had not posted it. After all, so my thoughts ran as I destroyed the envelope and contents. Such bargains are all part of the game. Buying and selling are a perfectly straightforward matter between dealer and customer. The dealer asks as much as he thinks he can extort, and the customer, having paid it, is under no obligation whatever to the dealer. The incident is closed. Dear friends, it is rightly said that winners don't do the different things, they do the things differently. It is written and it is read, it is applicable in all our trades of this human life. Winners never say he has problem, but he says that he is the answer of the problem. Winner always becomes the thermostat. It is written in all our holy scriptures, holy essays of this holy land. Similarly, we have read, when we become blind believer, A.Z. Gardiner, who has written on superstitions, it was inevitable that the fact that a murder has taken place at a house with the number 13 in a street, the letters of whose name number 13 would not pass unnoticed. If we took the last 100 murders that have been committed, I suppose we should find that as many have taken place at number 6 or number 7 or any other number you choose as at number 13, that the law of averages is as inexorable here as elsewhere. But this consideration does not prevent the word remarking on the fact when number 13 has its turn. Not that the word believes there is anything in the superstition. It is quite sure it is a mere childish folly. Of course, few of us would refuse to take a house because its number was 13, or decline an invitation to dinner because there were to be 13 at table. But most of us would be just a shadow desirable residents were numbered 11, and not any the less pleased with the dinner. If one of the guests contracted a chill that kept him away, we would not confess this little weakness to each other. We might even refuse to admit it to ourselves, but it is there. That it exists is evident from many irrefutable signs. There are numerous streets in London, and I dare say in other towns too, in which there is no house numbered 13, and I am told that it is very rare that a bed in a hospital bears that number. The superstition, threadbare though it was one, is still insufficiently real to enter into the calculations of a discreet landlord in regard to the letting qualities of this house, and into the calculations of a hospital as to the curative properties of a bed. In the latter case, general agreement would support the concession to the superstition, idle though that superstition is. Physical recovery is a matter of the mind as well as of the body, and the slightest shadow on the mind may, in a condition of low vitality, retard and even defeat recovery. Florence Nightingale's almost passionate advocacy of flowers in a sick bedroom was based on the necessity of the creation of a certain state of mind in the patient. There are few more curious revelations in the moving record by M. Duhamel of medical experiences during the war than the case of the man who died of a pimple on his nose. He had been hideously mutilated in battle and was brought into hospital a sheer wreck. But he was slowly patched up and seemed to have been saved when a pimple appeared on his nose. It was nothing in itself, but it was enough to produce a mental state that checked the flickering return of life. It assumed a fantastic importance in the mind of the patient, who, having survived the heavy blows of fate, died of something less than a pinprick. It is not difficult to understand that so fragile a hold of life might yield to the sudden discovery that you were lying in number 13 bed. I am not sure that I could go into the witness box and swear that I am wholly immune to these idle superstitions myself. It is true that of all the buses in London, that number 13, that numbered 13 chances to be the one that I constantly use, and I do not remember until now ever to have associated the superstition with it, and certainly I have never had anything but the most civil treatment from it. It is as well behaved as a bus and as free from unpleasant associations as any on the road. I would not change its number if I had the power to do so. But there are other circumstances of which I should find it less easy to clear myself of suspicion under cross examination. I never see a ladder against a house side without feeling that it is advisable to walk round it rather than under it. I say to myself that this is not homage to a foolish superstition, but a duty to my family. One must think of one's family. The fellow at the top of the ladder may drop anything, may even drop himself. He may have too much to drink. He He may be a victim of epileptic fits, and epileptic fits, as everyone knows, come on at the most unreasonable times and places. It is a mere measure of ordinary safety to walk around the ladder. No man is justified in inviting danger in order to flaunt his superiority to an idle fancy. Moreover, probably that fancy has its roots in the common sense fact that a man on a ladder does occasionally drop things. No doubt many of our superstitions have these commonplace and sensible origins. I imagine, for example, that the Jewish objection to pork as unclean on religious grounds is only due to the fact that in Eastern climates it is unclean on physical grounds. All the same, I suspect that I walk around the ladder. I am rather glad that I have such respectable and unaccessible reasons for doing so, even if conscious of this suspicion and ashamed to admit it to myself, I walk under the ladder. I am not quite sure that I have done so as a kind of negative concession to the superstition. I have challenged it rather than being unconscious of it. There is only one way of dodging the absurd dilemma, and that is to walk through the ladder. This is not easy. In the same way, I am sensible of a certain satisfaction when I see the new moon in the open rather than my left. I would not, for any consideration, arrange these things consciously, but if they happen so, I fancy I am better pleased than if they do not. And on these occasions, I have even caught my hand, which chanced to be in my pocket at the time, turning over money a little, a little surreptitiously, I thought, but still undeniably turning it. Hands have habits of their own, and one can't always be watching them. But these shadowy reminiscences of antique crudelty, which we discover in ourselves, play no part in the lives of any of us. They belong to a creed out one. Superstition was disinherited when science revealed the laws of the universe and put man in his place. It was no discredit to be superstitious when all the functions of nature were unexplored and man seemed the plaything of beneficent or sinister forces that he could neither control nor understand, but which held him in the hollow of their hand. He related everything that happened in nature to his own inexplicable existence, saw his fate in the clouds, his happiness or misery announced in the flight of birds, and referred every phenomena of life to the soothsayers and oracles. You may read in the Thucydides of battles being postponed and lost because some omen that had no more relation to the event than the falling of a leaf was against it. When Pompey was afraid that the Romans would elect Cato as praetor, he shouted to the assembly that he heard thunder and got the whole election postponed, for the Romans would never transact business after it had thundered. Alexander surrounded himself with fortune tellers and took counsel with them as a modern ruler takes counsel with his ministers. Even so great a man as Caesar and so modern and enlightened a man as Cicero left their fate to argues and omens. Sometimes the omens were right and sometimes they were wrong, but whether right or wrong, they were equally meaningless. Cicero lost his life by trusting to the wisdom of crowds when he was in flight from Antony, and Caesar Augustus he put to sea and might have escaped, but some crows chanced to circle round his vessel, and he took the circumstance to be unfavorable to his action, returned to shore, and was murdered. Even the farmer of ancient Greece consulted the omens and oracles, where the farmer today is only careful of his manures. I should have liked to have seen Caesar, and I should have liked to have heard Cicero, but on the balance, I think we who inherit this later day and who can jest at the shadows that were so real to them have the better end of time. It is pleasant to be about when the light is abroad. We do not know much more of the power that turns the handle of this idle show than our forefathers did, but at least we know the grotesque shadows that enveloped them. We do not look for divine guidance in the entrails of animals or the flight of the crows, and the House of Commons does not adjourn at a clap of thunder. Dear friends, this is all about on superstitions. This such kind of superstitions means blind beliefs are also prevails in the different cultures, and even all over the world we can observe such kind of blind beliefs. Aldous Huxley, who has written selected snobberies. All men are snobs about something. One is almost tempted to add, there is nothing about which man cannot feel snobbish. But this would doubtless be an exaggeration. There are certain disfiguring and mortal diseases about which there has probably never been my snobbery. I cannot imagine, for example, that there are any leprosy snobs, more picturesque diseases, even when they are dangerous and less dangerous. Diseases, particularly when they are the diseases of the rich, can be and very frequently are a source of snobbish self importance. I have met several adolescent consumption snobs who thought that it would be romantic to fade away in the flower of youth, like Keats or Mary Bashkirchev. Alas, the final stage of the consumptive fading are generally a good deal less romantic than these ingenious young tubercle snobs seem to imagine. To anyone who has actually witnessed these final stages, the complacent poeticizing of these adolescents must seem as exasperating as they are profoundly pathetic in the case of those commoner disease snobs whose claim to distinction is that they suffer from one of the maladies of rich. Exasperation is not tempered by very much sympathy. People who possess sufficient leisure, sufficient wealth, not to mention sufficient health, to go graveling from supper to supper, from doctor to fashionable doctor, in search of cures from problematical disease, cannot expect us to be very lavish in our solitude and pity. Disease snobbery is only one out of a great multitude of snobberies, of which now some, now others take pride of place in general Eastern. For snobberies ebb and flow, their empire rises, declines, and falls in the most approved historical manner. What were good snobberies 100 years ago are now out of fashion. Thus the snobbery of family is everywhere on the decline. The snobbery of culture, still strong, has now to wrestle with an organized and active low browsism, with a snobbery of ignorance and stupidity unique, so far as I know, in the whole of history. Hardly less characteristic of our age is that repulsive bourgeois snobbery born out of American prohibition. The melodic influences of this snobbery are rapidly spreading all over the world. Even in France, where the existence of so many varieties of delicious wine has hitherto imposed a judicious canonizership and has led to the branding of mere drinking is a brutish solecism. Even in France, the American bourgeois snobbery, with its odious accompaniment, a taste for hard drink in general and for cocktail in particular, is making headway among the rich. Bourgeois snobbery has now made it socially permissible in some circle, even rather creditable for well brought up women of all ages from 15 to 70 to be seen drunk, if not in public, at least in the very much tempered privacy of a party. Modernity snobbery, though not exclusive to our age, has come to assume an unprecedented importance. The reasons for this are simple and of a strictly economic character. Thanks to modern machinery, production is outrunning consumption. Organized waste among consumers is the first condition of our industrial prosperity. The sooner a consumer throws away the object he has bought and buys another, the better for the producer. At the same time, of course, the producer must do his bit by producing nothing but the most perishable article. The man who builds a skyscraper to last more than 40 years is a traitor to the building trade. The words are those of a great American contractor: substitute motor car, boot, suit of clothes, etc. for skyscrapers, and 1 year, 3 months, 6 months, and so on for 40 years, and you have the gospel of any leader of any modern industry. The modernity snobs, it is obvious is this industrialists' best friend for modernity snobs naturally tend to throw away their old possessions and buy new ones at a greater rate than those who are not modernity snobs. Therefore, it is in the producer's interest to encourage modernity snobbery, which in fact he does do on an enormous scale and to the tune of millions and millions a year by means of advertising. The newspapers do their best to help those who help them, and to the flood of advertisement is added a flood of less directly paid for propaganda in favor of modernity snobbery. The public is taught that up to dateness is one of the first duties of man. Docile, it accepts the retreated suggestion: we are all modernity snobs now. Most of us are also sorts art snobs. There are two varieties of art snobbery: the Platonic and the unplatonic. Platonic art snobs merely take an interest in art. Unplatonic art snobs go further and actually buy art. Platonic art snobbery is a branch of culture snobbery. Unplatonic art snobbery is a hybrid or mule, for it is simultaneously a subspecies of culture snobbery and of possession snobbery. A collection of works of art is a collection of culture symbols, and culture symbols still carry social prestige. It is also a collection of wealth symbols, for an art collection can represent money more effectively than a whole fleet of motor cars. The value of art snobbery to living artists is considerable. True, most art snobs collect only the works of the dead, for an old master is both a safer investment and a holier culture symbol than a living master. But some art snobs are also modernity snobs. There are enough of them, with a few eccentrics who like works of art for their own sake, to provide living artists with the means of subsistence. The value of snobbery in general, its humanistic point, consists in its power to stimulate activity. A society with plenty of snobberies is like a dog with plenty of fleas. It is not likely to become comatose. Every snobbery demands of its devotees unceasing efforts, a succession of sacrifices. The society snob must be perpetually lion hunting. The modernity snob can never rest from trying to be up to date. Swish, doctors, and the best that has been thought or said must be the daily and nightly preoccupation of all these snobs, respectively of diseases and culture. If we regard activity as being in itself a good, then we must count all snobberies as good. In this world of illusions as bad, then we shall condemn all snobberies out of hand. Most of us, I suppose, take up our position somewhere between the two extremes. We regard some activities as good, others as indifferent, or either tolerate or detest snobbery, even while intentionally disliking most individual culture snobs, because it compels the Philistines to pay at least some slight tribute to the things of the mind, and so helps to make the world less dangerous. On the other hand, will rank the snobbery of possessions above culture snobbery. He will do his best to persuade people that those who have fewer possessions, particularly possessions on four wheels, are inferior to those who have more possessions, and so on. Each hierarchy culminates in its own particular pop. Dear friends, this is all about selected snobberies. Next is In Praise of Ignorance, written by Hilaire Belloc. Erasmus wrote In Praise of Folly. I, coming exactly 400 years after, would like to write in praise of ignorance. I would like to write a little book about it, just as he did about folly, but I am most unjustly handicapped. In the first place, I can't write what I like because we are not free, as the men of Renaissance were free. In the second place, I haven't the talent. Still, I can, at any rate, write a little article in praise of ignorance, and so help me God, I will. Remark the scope and amplitude of the affair. Let any man, however learned he may think himself, however varied his acquaintance with men, muck, money, and the printed word, set down a list of subjects on which he could competently deal, then let him compare it with the vast, the oceanic prospect of the things of which he knows nothing, nor let any man be humbled by this comparison. It is a great thing to possess a true knowledge of one's own ignorance, for in a sense you must have knowledge even to know the names of things which you do not know, as for instance by pairs, metabolism and eutychianism, isosocietics, and the greater lymphatics, chronology and entomology, to say nothing of apology in the sense of arguments in defense of religious doctrine, for apology of a policeman is every man's affair. You may take a list of countries of which you know the name and the shape on the map, but of themselves nothing at all. Of towns, of persons, very great persons, whose names are familiar to you, but beyond the name nothing. To go back to theologies, examine yourself on genealogy. What were the maiden names of Charlemagne's four great grandmothers? Who is the rightful king of England at the present moment? If and here again glorious ignorance intrudes the supposed but doubtful will of Henry VIII still have force of law. What were the claims of the Spanish Infanta to that same throne of England at the end of the 16th century, and who was the father of Zebedee's children? Anyone could write down at top speed in half an hour more points of this kind on which he knew nothing than he could write down by laborious self examination in a whole day similar points on which he had some little knowledge. The modern system of examination, already menaced, has been very justly blamed by the wisest and the best. One of the less wise and not so good shall here say something in its favor. Anyone who has sat for an examination has had a vivid revelation of his own ignorance. I have written answers to perhaps 100 examination papers in my time, and my aptitude towards each of the wretched printed things as it lay before me, I being then surrounded by dozens of other victims, each at his little desk with an underpaid invigilator glaring at us from a platform above, was one of violent bewilderment, loss of foothold, sinking into the abyss. I would see something like this. Discuss the action of Berengarius at the Council of Blois. I knew vaguely what council meant. I had been so Blois, but beyond triction of the plain angle by the epic cycloidal method, I could know, or again much more straightforward, mention in their order the places visited by St. Paul in his something missionary journey, nothing doing. I say that the soul receives great profit by correction of this kind. No man who has been examined but has at least come upon the knowledge of his own ignorance, which is the beginning of learning. There are some indeed so straight hearted and so same that they approach examination daily from the very standpoint of ignorance, like those beloved travelers who, meeting the aristocracy of a foreign land, gaze openly at them. For mountebanks keep their ends superbly in the vast saloons of Rome, of Warsaw, of Vienna, and go out contented with a smile yet broader than that which dignified their entrance. Of such was the young student of divinity, later obsessed of cure of souls in the isle of man, and quietly affecting medieval customs, being set a certain examination paper to test his qualification for holy orders. Read its return very carefully and discovered that of 6 questions he was to select 3. Of those 6 questions, one half meant nothing to him whatsoever. They mentioned things of which he had no more heard than had the Colossians or Ephesians or whoever they were of the first century, yet heard of the Holy Ghost. But the other 3 contained each a word which he had heard before. He carefully put a little cross against each such question. They were: one is, what do you know of the Council of Chalcedon? Second, was Sozoman justified in his treatment of the Apollinarians? 3 is, what is the distinction between the Cyprianic and Augustinian attitude towards the Western patriarchates. He wrote each of these questions out in a fair, round, clerically hand, leaving a little space below each, then each of these spaces. He solemnly wrote for the first the answer nothing, for the second no, for the third none. Having thus completed his paper, he went up and presented it to the invigilator, bowed and walked out. The flagging clerics around him envied the facility of his erudition, the rapacity of his completed task, his early illumination into the happy sunlight of an Oxford June, but he was flogged, as is my most unfortunate foible in the discussion of any matter truly profound. I have allowed preliminaries to take up nearly all my space, and I have not as yet approached that chief spiritual attribute of ignorance, which is its power to flood the mind with happiness. Ignorance is a very dot of beatitude. All the mystery and marvel of his wide chamber, their torturous and sordid ways, all our loves, all our hero worships, all our dreams of coming peace, all our visions of fortune are the fruits of ignorance. A man leaves a congenial company with whom he has held full communion. He goes off to take his train and thinks to have left behind him souls still vibrating in harmony with his own. They recollect him with a peaceful love. If they return to his name, it is with murmurs of approbation. He rolls home satisfied, but the root of his happiness lies deep in ignorance, for hardly had he shut the door behind him when he is, but he has got no need to include upon a note of grandeur it by ignorance alone that we advance through the rough seas of this our mortal life. The metaphor is not original. I do not claim it so, I copy it from others. Were not men ignorant of what lay before them, no one would face the adventure dressed in a sort of purple grey and had himself so groomed and set up that he looked like the successful businessman of the advertisements, which indeed he was. This man told me during a public luncheon that he had found life increasingly pleasant and that in every fresh stage of it he discovered a further satisfaction. Now I am glad to say that within 24 hours he was shot out of his motor car and broke upon the sacred flints of England. That prominent jaw which he had so abnormally abused, nevermore would he boast, or at least not without a horrid mumbling. In consideration of all this, I thank God for my own ignorance, and though it unfortunately less than that of most people, I flatter myself it will serve. So, dear friend, it is all about in praise of ignorance. Rest of the short story we will read later on again. May God bless the spiritual standard of this holy land. Indian land is the land of forefathers, foretellers, forecasters, freedom fighters, those who came first on this land. Their aim was to maintain the spiritual standard of this nation all over the world. Whether our India may be lagged behind, maybe it has the highest place all over the world. Dear friends, when we go through the history of our Indians, scholars, Indian forefathers, foretellers, they are the starters of the social media all over the world now. In the present presence of our present Prime Minister Modi ji, India is being an explorer, exposer and exporter of the manufacturing industries in India. There, in the previous year, of 2022, we have 14 greatest achievements all over the world and numberless initiatives India has taken. This is and these are the results of naturality, because this is in the nature of our Indians. When we are recreated, regenerated and reoperated by having the friendliness, familiarity with the nature. It is in the heart, in the mind and in the blood of our youngsters that they can regenerate and recreate, reoperate by their skills, talents, not only at the state level but all over the world at the central level. They can bring a name fame again towards the nation, because this nation is the head of the nations of all over the world because of its diversities, adversities. It has many colors, cultures, as for the notion of Swami Vivekananda, who addressed the worldly people by these two words, my brothers and sisters of the America. These words were the symbol of purity of the soul, and these words brought name, fame of our Indian culture all over the world. All the personalities, those who were present at that time, scientists, research scholars, and other dignitaries, those who were available at that time, they appreciated, admired at that time. And now our India has got the position with the 75 years of this freedom, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and our present Prime Minister is planning for entertaining its years after 100 years. After the completion of the 1 century, after the independence, India will stand at the top of the countries, top of the nations of the world. There is no doubt, because our Indian scholars, our Indian philosophy, our Indian psychology, our Indian medical science, not medical, commerce, arts, and all the sectors of agriculture, industry, means of communication, transportation, banking, railways, all professionals are working with enthusiastically and with their dynamic power, with their holy scripture. It is written, it is said that human life is the rare, and we are bring name fame of this human life by appreciating the human breath, by appreciating its value. We are to understand the value of human beings, then we can get, we can know the spiritual values of this nation all over the world. Nice to see all of you, nice to meet all of you, dear friends, dear brothers. May God bless all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.